So, in this presentation, we discuss the education of a British protected child, Chinua Achebe's famous autobiographical essay, The Education of a British Protected Child. Here's a short biography of Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian writer, he was born in 1930 and died in 2013. Well, Chinua Achebe is known as the father of African literature. He was a Nigerian novelist, poet, professor, and a critic, literary critic. Achebe witnessed the clash and conflict of European and African cultures. He became the voice of Africa with the publication of his debut novel, Things Fall Apart. Oh, that's a very, very famous novel, Things Fall Apart, that is often considered as his masterpiece. It is perhaps the most widely read book in modern African literature. It has been translated into 57 languages. The book has sold over 20 million copies around the world. Achebe's other novels include uh, the famous novel No Longer at Ease, which was published in 1960. Another book that was published in 1964, The Arrow of Gold. Well, still another one in 1966, A Man of the People. And The Ant Hills of the Savannah, which was published in 1987. And he has also won a large number of awards. The awards include the German Bestsellers Peace Prize, then the Dorothy and the Lillian Gish Prize, the very famous Man Booker International Prize, and he has also received honorary doctorate degrees from over 20 American universities. Well, concerning this essay, which is a highly autobiographical essay, it was delivered as the Ashby Lecture at Cambridge University on the 22nd of January 1993. The broad theme of the lecture was human values. Achebe here discusses how he grew up to be a writer and how both the traditional Igbo culture, the African Nigerian culture, the Igbo culture to which he belonged, as well as the newly adopted Christian values and the English education informed the understanding in the world. Hence, though he detested the entire project of colonialism, well, he was not an admirer of colonialism. He didn't like it, he detested it. But still, he takes a position here which is very, very neutral. His position was neither antagonistic nor sympathetic nor obliging, but he took the middle ground. Well, concerning the summary of this lecture, here is the first section, the first part. Chinua Achebe remembers how he missed the opportunity of becoming a scholar in 1954. Well, he had an opportunity. He had a chance to become a scholar, to have higher education in the UK. Well, in 1954, when Trinity College, Cambridge rejected his application, so he missed the bus. He lost the opportunity to become a scholar. So in 1957, after 4 years, he had another opportunity. He had his first opportunity to travel out of Nigeria to study again at the UK, at the BBC Staff School in London. But remember, in his passport, Chinua Achebe was described as a British protected person. Well, that is a description that was given about him in the passport. And he takes up the position of the middle ground. Well, while talking about his childhood, the colonialism and all those things, he would like to take up the middle ground, though that position, the middle ground lacks luster. It is not a bright position. There is no drama. That position it is undramatic, and also it is unspectacular. It is not at all attractive. It is not at all eventful. So there is no attraction. It is not attractive. He recalls his Igbo culture and his hometown, Ogidi. The Igbo people, they are not starry-eyed. They are not very romantic about the world. And so, for the same reason, their poetry does not celebrate romantic love. And here is the second section. Well, here in this part, Achebe describes his childhood days at Ogidi and the festivals that they had, their language and their customs and all those things he describes. And dispossession people, of course, when the British were there, when British colonized Nigeria, well, the native people were thrown out of their own land. So dispossession, getting thrown out of one's own native land, dispossession is no laughing matter. It is no occasion for humor. The amazing thing is that the dispossessed, the people who are dispossessed, the people who are thrown out of the land, will often turn his powerlessness to good account, and he will start laughing. Well, he takes things, in a light-hearted manner, and he laughs his way, and thereby he lifts himself out of desolation and despair. This is the only way he tries to steer clear of the desolation, unhappiness, and despair. Achebe remembers how his mother had an amusing experience of a linguistic confusion on Igbo language by Miss Warner. Miss Warner was his mother's principal, the principal of the school where his mother in her childhood days was studying. As he began to learn his first English words at school, as Chinua Achebe, as he started learning his first English words at school, well, he remembers the difficulty he had of figuring out right, wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong. Right is the opposite of wrong. So what does it mean, right, wrong? Well, he couldn't find out. Right, wrong here, right is a verb. To right the wrong, to correct the mistake, to right the wrong. Achebe, he was a Christian, was aloof, well, was away from the rest of the children in the village, as the place was partly Christianized. It was getting Christianized, and he was a Christian. And most of the people, the children of the village, they were natives. Well, Christianity divided the village into two: the people of the church and the people of the world. So that's the two worlds. The average Christian enjoyed the sights and the sounds of traditional festivities. Non-Christians observed others very, very closely because they were suspicious, because it's a new religion, so new people, new culture. And 24th of May was known as the Empire Day. That's a secular day, a secular festival. The 25th, the 24th of May every year was known as the Empire Day, because that was the birthday of Queen Victoria. Achebe also recollects his school days. There was another secular event which was called the anniversary, which was the annual commemoration of the coming of the gospel to Igbo land on the 27th of July, 1857, the commemoration day. The annual, which is known as it is known as the anniversary. It was on that particular day, on the 27th of July, 1857, that Christianity first came to that Igbo land. Well, the third section actually also tells us about his education. At that time, the Second World War had begun just as he was finishing his second standard, the Standard 2. The rest of his primary education was against its distant background, against the background of the Second World War. Songs were, the battle was going on, the war was going on, the Second World War was going on. Songs were composed in support of Britain. Later, afterwards, he joined the government college, Umuahia, and that college was closed down for some time because its buildings were transformed into a camp for prisoners of war. That is, the German and Italian prisoners of war caught during the Second World War. Achebe also remembers this college, this particular college, this government college, Umuahia, as its alumni. The students, the old students of that college, that consisted of many, many pioneers, many, many famous writers in African literature in his day. That was that he was highly fortunate to have got an opportunity to study there in that government college. Achebe also remembers some of his teachers who influenced his early life. He says, Achebe says, well, colonialism has altered, changed several lives across the globe. Well, this is the position that he takes up the middle ground. He's neither antagonistic nor sympathetic. He takes up a neutral position, the middle ground, from where he can have uh, a balanced assessment of a balanced view of the colonialism, the colonialism period, the period of colonialism in Nigeria. And here is, well, the short answer questions. The first question is, what is the poetic justice? Achebe talks about a poetic justice. The poetic justice that Achebe is talking about at the beginning of the essay. Well, it's about, that he was about to get admission to Trinity College, Cambridge, but the college turned down his application. But and for the same reason, he didn't become a scholar. But remember, he became a writer. It was because of that, and that is the poetic justice. Achebe missed the opportunity of becoming a scholar 40 years ago when Trinity College, Cambridge, turned down his application or rejected his application to study there. Later, he took his first degree at the new University College Ibadan. And remember, well, even though he didn't become a scholar, he became a writer, a very, very famous writer. So this is the poetic justice. Well, question number 2. Why is Achebe wary of one way, one truth, one life menace? One way, one truth, one life menace. Well, it is about the middle ground. It is, while talking about the middle ground, he says middle ground is a very, very lucky position because there is one in front and one at the back. There is one in the front and one at the back. Well, the other positions, it is one way, just one thing, one religion, one language, one faith, one caste, one belief. Well, it is not, there is no thrill, there is no attraction, there is no beauty, because that is, fanaticism, any kind of fanaticism, religious fanaticism, and linguistic fanaticism, and such fanaticism is, one way, one truth, and one life. He says it is not nice. It is singularity, but he likes plurality. Well, the phrase one way, one truth, one life menace means fanaticism. It is singularly horrendous. It is horrible. It is, intolerable. But the preference of Igbo, the Igbo community, the Igbo people, the Igbo society, is the preference of the Igbo is not singularity. It doesn't prefer singularity, that is one truth, one way, one menace, but it prefers plurality or duality. Question number 3. Explain the analogy, the comparison of Achebe to Moses. He compares himself to, Moses. Well, that is described, that is given in detail in the chapter called Exodus of the Holy Bible. Well, Achebe evokes the biblical tale of the infant Moses. Infant Moses, well, it was the Achebe evokes the biblical tale of the infant Moses and the Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh made a proclamation, made an order. Well, all the male children born to these Jewish people, well, they should be thrown to the river Nile. But it was at that time. It was at that time during the Exodus, during their short stay in Egypt, that Moses was born. But the mother of Moses, well, she kept the child in a basket on the river Nile. Well, it's a long story, and he compares himself to, the infant Moses. He was like the infant Moses to the colonial period, the colonial masters. It is like that, but he says no. It was not a good comparison. It is not a good comparison because it is like, comparing the glowworm comparing itself to the full moon. Glowworm is something very, very small, but moon, well, it's a thing of beauty. Achebe evokes the biblical tale of the infant Moses and the Pharaoh's daughter to describe his own cultural adoption by the guardians of the alien palace, the British. That was the British Empire. But then, after, he just compares himself to infant Moses. But then he quickly adds, calling this allusion, oh, it was sheer effrontery. Well, this is nonsense because it is just like a glowworm comparing itself to the full moon. Question number 4. Why was Miss Warner offended? The principal of the school where Achebe's mother was studying a student. Miss Warner, the principal of St. Monica's Girls' School, where Achebe's mother was studying. Well, during her stay with Miss Warner, she laughed at when the latter used an Igbo word badly. Well, she pronounced the word badly. Well, it is not her fault, but she was a child. She just laughed, and Miss Warner, the principal, was offended. She started beating her. She walloped her, and also admonished her. She told her, "Don't laugh at people when they make mistakes. Well, especially when one is in the stage of studying a new language. You should correct me. Don't laugh at me." And she was offended. Then, what was Stewart Young's attitude to the colonial system? Well, there was one Dr. J.M. Stewart Young. He was an eccentric Englishman who had been living and trading in Onitsha, in Nigeria, since the beginning of the 20th century. He had first come to Nigeria as a colonial civil servant. First, he came there as a civil servant, and then turned against the British system, turned against the colonial system. Later, what happened was he became a merchant and challenged, with the support of the local people, with the support of the native people, the monopoly of European commercial groups. He challenged, whereas he was, siding with the natives, Dr. J.M. Stewart. Now, what was a textbook act? Achebe talks about a textbook act. Well, there was a principal, William Simpson, the principal of Achebe's school. William Simpson believed that the excessive devotion of students to book work is a real danger. Don't be bookworms. Don't always, busy themselves with the textbooks, the school books. No, that's very, very dangerous, he said. And he made a rule. What's the rule? That which promoted reading of novels. He encouraged the students to read novels and prohibited the reading of any textbooks after classes on 3 days of the week. Well, for 3 days, the students are not supposed to touch the textbooks at home. He called it, William Simpson, the principal, called it the Textbook Act, that allowed students to extensively read fiction, biographies, and magazines. Well, that gave them a lot of time. That is 4 days a week to read books other than textbooks, fiction, novels, short stories, biographies, and other books for general reading. Well, that's the end of the short answer questions, and here is some paragraph questions. Question number 1. The first question is, discuss the irony of the title, The Education of a British Protected Child. It's ironic, the title. A British child is okay, a protected child is okay, but what about a British protected child? It is for the first time that we hear such an expression, a British protected child. It's ironic. What is the irony? Achebe says the title The title of his lecture, The Education of a British Protected Child, it does not reflect the complexity of the strongly multi-ethnic, there are different ethnic groups in Africa, in Nigeria, multi-ethnic, multilingual, several languages, multi-religious, and somewhat chaotic, full of confusion because there are, uh, so many things of the same type. A chaotic situation Achebe was born into as a colonial subject. His first passport described him as a British protected child when he was about to go to the UK to attend the BBC school. He was described as a British protected child. The education Achebe and his fellow Nigerians received from their British protectors was not a model of perfection. While denouncing colonialism, well, he doesn't like colonialism, but still he is not antagonistic. He's not against it. Achebe takes up neither the foreground nor the background. He takes up a very comfortable position, which is the middle ground. And he says that middle ground is the home of doubt, indecision, suspension of disbelief, playfulness, and of irony. That's a very, very comfortable position. Well, you are neither antagonistic nor sympathetic. That's a very comfortable position. That's the Igbo culture. Number two, why does Achebe take the middle ground while looking at colonialism? While talking about colonial rule, Achebe prefers to be in the middle ground rather than being in the foreground or background. He doesn't like the foreground or the background. He is very comfortable with the middle ground. That middle ground is the least admired of the three because it is not bright, it is not beautiful, it lacks luster. There is no drama, it is undramatic. It is not spectacular, unspectacular. The Igbo call this ground lucky and desirable because that position rejects one way, one truth, and one life menace, well, which is fundamentalism, fanaticism. It is not that. This is plurality. The middle ground, it welcomes, it is comfortable with the plurality. The middle ground is neither the origin of things nor the last things. It has a future to wish for. It has also a past to fall back on. Even though Achebe detested colonial, even though he hated it, he was not a critic. He was neither a critic nor an admirer. His position was neither antagonistic nor sympathetic. He took the comfortable middle ground. Question number three. How does Achebe illustrate that Christianity did not spread among Igbo people like wildfire? Well, the growth of Christianity, the spread of Christianity, it was not very fast. It was a very, very slow affair. Achebe talks about the conversion of his people into Christianity in his novel, Things Fall Apart. It is in that novel, it is in the novel Things Fall Apart that he describes the spread of Christianity, the coming of Christianity in Nigeria. In fact, Christianity did not sweep through Igbo land like wildfire. It was not a fast, quick growth. The first missionaries came to Niger River, river town of Onitsha in 1857. That is the first arrival. From that time, from that beachhead, they finally reached his town, which is Ogidi, in 1892. So 1857 to 1892. Well, the distance from Onitsha to Ogidi is only 7 miles. 7 miles in 35 years. That means 1 mile every 5 years. And so he says, well, there was no whirlwind. There was no whirlwind. How did native teachers continue teaching the strategies of his masters? Well, even after the British, the colonials left, well, the colonial teachers, the white teachers, the British teachers were replaced by native teachers, but still, they continued the same strategies, the methodologies, or were the same. The methodologies that the native teachers followed was the same as those of their masters, the colonial masters. When Achebe started going to primary school, missionary teachers like Miss Warner were no longer around. Education at that level was completely in the hands of native teachers. But the legacy of the unspared road remained. The legacy of the unspared road. Because there's a famous saying in English, spare the road and spoil the child. Well, if you stop punishing the child, if you stop punishing the children, if you stop using the rod, the stick, well, you will just spoil the child. So the legacy of the unspared rod still remained. There was a small amendment, a small change. What was that? Students were walloped. They were beaten, not for laughing when a mistake was made, not for laughing when a mistake was made, but for making it. They were beaten, they were punished for making mistakes, not for laughing when some other student makes a mistake. That was a time when the native culture and traditions were dying under the influence of the new culture, the new Christian, British, English culture, the invading culture. He was able to retain his African identity even though he was a Christian, even though he had his English education. Well, he's happy that he was able to retain his native culture, his native identity, his African identity. Achebe also mentions a number of teachers who influenced him throughout his life, through his entire life. Well, question number 5. How were the students taught to show their loyalty to the British during the war? Because there were several ways in which they were asked to show their loyalty by singing songs, by singing especially songs in praise of Britain and against the songs that songs against the enemies, well, the rivals, the rivals in the war. Second World War began just as Achebe was finishing his standard 2. When he was in the second standard, Second World War started. The rest of his primary education happened against the background of the Second World War. They were very loyal to Britain. Well, because Britain was they were their masters, and they did what they could to help Britain. Their headmaster told them that every palm kernel, because it was a country of the oil palm, so every palm kernel they collected in the bush would buy a nail for Hitler, well, the German despot, a nail for Hitler's coffin. As the war continued, well, supplies for home and school became more and more scarce. Well, usually it happens, famine, because the concentration of the country would be in the war front, so the common people will suffer. Salt, common salt, and the kitchen salt was severely rationed and disappeared from the open market. Students practiced a song called "Germany is Falling." Well, the enemies, the Germany is falling, in support of Britain. And here is the 6th question, paragraph question. Who were the colonial educators who, by crossing the unbridgeable colonial divide, made a lasting impression on Achebe? There were some teachers, who he can never forget. English teachers, they were very, very benevolent, very, very influential, highly influential, whom he can never forget. Achebe recalls some of his English teachers with the fondness, with love. He remembers his mother's teacher, Miss Warner, who taught her English. He also recalls the principal of the school, William Simpson, who encouraged students to read fiction and magazines. Another remarkable teacher was James Welsh, professor of religious studies. Achebe says that all his good teachers taught him with passion what they knew. They taught the Nigerian, the Africans children what they knew, not what the children wanted, but what the teachers knew. They left it to him. The teachers left it to the child to sort out whatever he could use in the search for the things that belonged to his peace. Well, it was up to him. It was up to the children. It was up to the child to receive or to sort out what was useful for him. That was up to the child. And here is the last question, which is an essay. Well, summarize the ideas contained in Achebe's speech, The Education of a British Protected Child. Well, here's the first paragraph, the introduction. Chinua Achebe, the father of African literature, is known widely for his famous novel, Things Fall Apart. This essay, which is remember, it's a lecture. The Education of a British Protected Child is a lecture delivered at Cambridge University on the 22nd of January, 1993. Well, the broad theme of the lecture was human values. Paragraph number 2. Achebe talks about the conversion of his people into Christianity in his novel, Things Fall Apart. In fact, Christianity did not sweep through Igbo land like wildfire. It was not a fast growth. It was a slow affair. That is 1 mile every 5 years. So there is no whirlwind. He says there is no whirlwind. It was not, it didn't spread like wildfire. When Achebe started going to primary school, missionary teachers like Miss Warner were no longer, they were no longer around. They were not there. They had left. Education at that level was completely in the hands of native teachers. But remember, the principles, the legacy, the tradition, the legacy of the unspared road, it remained. There was a small amendment. What was it? Students were still beaten. They were walloped. Not for laughing when a mistake was made, but for making the mistake. Students were beaten, punished for making the mistake, not for laughing when a mistake was made. Well, the Second World War began just as Achebe was finishing his second standard. The rest of his primary education happened against its distant background, against the background of the Second World War. They were very, very loyal to Britain and did what they could to help Britain in the war. Their headmaster told them that every palm kernel they collected in the bush would buy a nail for Hitler, that is the German leader, Hitler's coffin. So down with Hitler. That was the message carried by the song. Achebe recalled some of his English teachers with fondness. He remembers his mother's teacher, Miss Warner, who taught her English, and the principal of his school, William Simpson, who encouraged his students to read fiction and magazines. Well, the textbook act. Achebe says that all his good teachers taught him with passion what they knew. Well, that is a sort of criticism, isn't it? Because teachers taught the children what they knew, not what the children wanted. And in the essay, well, the concluding paragraph, Achebe discusses how he grew up to be a writer, how both the traditional Igbo culture to which he belonged, as well as the newly adopted Christian values and the English education contributed to his understanding of the world. Hence, though he hated the entire project of colonialism, well, his position was neither antagonistic nor obliging. Well, he took up the middle ground. And this is the end of our discussion of Chinua Achebe's famous lecture, The Education of a British Protected Child. Thank you very much.